southern hemisphere of our world, there is a vast country. Half a continent in size, it is a land of heavenly beaches, steamy rainforests, and vast plains that now feed hundreds of millions. A country with a troubled past, built on slavery and exploitation of resources. 500 years later, it now stands on the brink of becoming a global power in its own right. This is where Africa, Europe, and the Americas collided, and the result was Brazil. The name of the country is believed to have come from the Brazilwood tree that once grew in large numbers along the coast, so named by the Portuguese colonists that referred to the valuable red dye it produced. Brasa is ember in Portuguese, so Brazil is red like an ember. But prior to this, the vast region of East and South America was home to hundreds of indigenous tribes that had been living there as early as 11,000 years ago. The largest of these groups were the Tupis, Guaranis, Geish, and Arawaks. As many as 6 million occupied the area at the time of the arrival of the Europeans, but this number was decimated in the following few years, as it was in so many parts of the Americas at this time, by imported diseases that they had no immunity to. Brazil has the dubious honor of being the last country in the Americas to abolish slavery in 1888, 33 years after the United States and 55 years after the British. Slavery was a central factor that shaped Brazil and whose effects can still be seen today in the ethnic mix of the people and the problems the country still faces, as we shall see. Sugar was the mainstay of the Brazilian economy until around 1700, when increasing competition for the sugar market by Caribbean plantations drove prices down. The plantations had largely been based upon the long eastern coast of Brazil, with the interior still largely an ungoverned wild land of indigenous peoples, cattlemen, missionaries, runaway slaves, and European outlaws escaping debt or tax demands. Away from the cities and in the interior, destruction of the Amazon rainforest by the poor looking to eke out some living on the frontier has brought unwelcome international attention and criticism, as many in the developed world see this region as a global asset both for its biodiversity and its role in acting as a sink for carbon dioxide. The car journey of 5,700 kilometers from the most northern to the southern tips would take you 3.5 days non-stop. The equivalent east-west journey is coincidentally almost the exact same in terms of distance and travel time. Better to take the plane, I'd say. Topographically, Brazil is relatively flat, especially in view of South America having the world's longest and second tallest mountain range. But the Andes are in the west of the continent and Brazil in the east. Instead, the country is essentially divided into 3 sections: the vast, low-lying Amazon River basin of the northwest, the equally vast upland plateau known as the Planalto Central of the east and south, and the narrow Atlantic coastal strip. In terms of natural biomes, Brazil has among the richest of any countries. The Amazon basin of tropical evergreen broadleaf forest is home to the world's second longest river and largest by water volume, and discussion of which could take up a whole video in itself, such as the richness of its ecosystem and the importance it plays globally in terms of regulation of climate. The area was for the longest time unexplored, and even to this day it is believed that there may still be indigenous tribes there that we have still not made contact with. The continued deforestation of this area, much of it done without government permission, to make way for farming and cattle grazing in particular, has been a touchpoint in Brazilian relations with the countries of the developed world who view this area as a global resource. Evergreen forest also exists along much of the Atlantic coastal strip. This is known as the Atlantic forest and is almost as rich as the Amazon, being fed by constant year-round rains thanks to favourable trade winds. Further south, these forests change in species types due to a wider band of temperature between seasons and make up the subtropical broadleaf forests in this area. The centre of the country, the vast Planalto Central, was once dominated by savanna, a mix of broken forest and tropical grasses, but has since been extensively farmed and is responsible for Brazil's giant agricultural sector. Between the evergreen forests and savanna lies a broad stretch of seasonal tropical forest that loses its leaves in the dry season. The dry northeast, prone to long droughts in some years, is unable to sustain anything beyond semi-desert scrub-like vegetation in what is known as the Caatinga. Lastly, temperate grassland or pampas borders the far south with Uruguay and Argentina. With a current estimated population of 212 million, Brazil is the world's 6th most populous country. Most Brazilians live in relatively small areas of concentration in the southeast and northeast, while much of the interior, by contrast, is either undeveloped rainforest or farmland. Brazil is ethnically one of the most diverse countries in the world, a product of its unique history of indigenous peoples, Portuguese colonists, later European settlers, and African slaves. The result of this historical melting pot creates a complex picture today. How Brazilians identify their ethnicity is not straightforward and is, as usual on matters of race, controversial. Heitor Villa-Lobos, a native of Rio, is regarded as the most famous Latin American classical composer in history and created his own unique style through the blending of traditional European classical music and Brazilian rhythms. Samba is considered the national rhythm of Brazil and derives from African traditional styles that were brought over with the slaves in the colonial period. Bossa Nova, developed in Rio in the 1950s, simplified and toned down samba and fused it with jazz elements to create a sound that grew to international popularity in the 1960s and became the sound that you would hear in many Hollywood movies, in many lounges, and elevators around the world. Brazilian architecture has drawn mainly from traditional European elements in the past, but many Brazilian architects in the 20th centuries embraced modernism, with the Rio-born Oscar Niemeyer becoming internationally recognized for his work in the development of the new capital of Brasilia, as well as collaboration on the United Nations complex in New York City. There isn't any country in the world quite like Brazil. It had the unfortunate start of simply being a project for the exploitation of resources to send back to the mother country of Portugal, with the reckless exploitation of indigenous and African peoples along the way. But 500 years later, that project is a country that overshadows its progenitor 20 times over. A truly international mix of people that have forged their own unique identity across this vast country of geographic riches, and who together have created the beginnings of an economic superpower. There is no question that the country still faces serious problems, such as those of socially integrating its former slaves, of government corruption, and environmental destruction. Whether it continues to grow and develop is up to the 200 million that call themselves Brazilian. It has been a difficult birth and childhood for a nation, but as Brazil moves to claim its seat at the top table of international movers and shakers, the future can hold great promise if the country can unite and put its troubled past behind it.